In these lectures, we'll look at a radical text called Bhimayana, and we'll come to the text in a bit. And this is part of our chronological journey in Indian writing in English. So we reach Bhimayan, a graphic novel. So as we have explored many genres throughout this survey, now we reach a very interesting contemporary experiment that is going on in Indian writing in English, that is with the graphic art itself, and how graphic novels, which have recently started becoming an expression of Indian experience and mostly related in English itself. So one of those texts we've taken for this course is called Bhimayan, and obviously, as the name is suggestive, this is a story of B.R. Ambedkar, his biography that is relayed through in a graphic novel itself. And before we go into the text itself, I want to draw your attention to this article which is published in Contemporary Education Dialogue, and this is an interview between S. Anand and Vivek Velanki. So S. Anand is the publisher of Navayana, which published Bhimayan, the text itself. It's an independent press based in New Delhi that focuses on issue of caste from anti-caste perspective. He's the co-author of Bhimayan, a graphic biography of Dr. Bhim Ramji Ambedkar. So, in this and this this interview is quite important because it lays ground for the conceptualization of Ambedkar's story in the graphic narrative form itself. Ambedkar's story is pretty well known by now, and then his experience with untouchability and caste discrimination and his politics around it, and him being an inspiration to countless generations of Dalits and others has been documented now. What Bhimayan does is to present Ambedkar in a graphic form for the first time, not for the first time actually, in a very different form for the first time, as part of a graphic novel itself. We'll come to see some of the earlier graphic representations of Ambedkar that was done in Amar Chitra Katha and others, but this is a very political and a radical experiment of sorts in terms of Ambedkar, in picturizing, representing Ambedkar's experience. Let's read the interview to get a sense of what drove this enterprise and what was behind getting this representation onto the page itself, on the graphic page itself, and how the graphic art demands a very different kind of form, and also the expressions have to be modulated according to the form. Very interestingly, if we look at Bhimayan, it's a book that has uses a graphic form inspired by Pardhan Gond art. So what it does is it brings in tribal form, one of the most indigenous forms of art that is used by Indians, and the artists are named as we will go and look at the text itself. It will become clear. Durgabai Vyam and Subhash Vyam, who are very eminent Pardhan Gond artists, who bring this tribal art form into what is a very West dominated arena, which has very conventional ways of panels and a certain kind of an idiom, which is subverted here thanks to the use of this kind of a form itself. We'll come to this discussions itself. Let's first go and have a look at what S. Anand, the publisher and also one of the co-authors of Bhimayana, has to say about it. Now, the question being asked that you have co-authored the book Bhimayana, a graphic biography of Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. Can you take us through the idea of the book and tell us how it came about? And Anand then goes on to tell us that this book is an attempt to conscientize people about Ambedkar, his personal experience, how this still rings true for a lot of Dalit. The first time I encountered these fragments of Ambedkar's autobiographical writing was in one of the volumes which I had not paid attention to. It was sandwiched in about 18 to 20 pages and was called Waiting for a Visa. So this autobiographical fragment is which was the inspiration behind Bhimayana, is called Waiting for a Visa, and so it's a very short document, 18 to 20 pages. It was not clear what visa he was referring to. He seemed to have jotted down these fragments over a period of 20 to 25 years. So the earliest incident is about his school. Then he talks about riding a cart with his brothers and other siblings and being denied transport and all kinds of hassle that he faces. Then he moves to describe the incident where he returns from Colombia and tries to find a boarding place in Baroda where he had to serve the Maharaja who had sponsored his education. So these three incidents form the centerpiece of the book itself. As we will see, there are three sections to the book, and these three sections each take up one incident. One first in the school, second when he's going to meet his father and the transport that is there, and then the third one being denied a place to stay in Baroda itself. So these three books are there, and we'll have a look at each of them. So this was part of this autobiographical vignette, if we can call it, Waiting for a Visa. And Anand says that he chanced upon this, he had not paid attention to these, and then that's why it was news to me, and it was Ravi Kumar, my friend and partner in Navayana, who drew my attention to that. And in 2003 we set out to launch Navayana. We did 4 small booklets. One of our first books was called Ambedkar Autobiographical Notes. It was around 40 pages, and since then it occurred to me that one should do some kind of illustrated version of it. Back then I was not familiar with the term graphic novel. All I knew was comic books like Amar Chitrakatha, Tintin, Asterix and such. So the idea was to render our material on Ambedkar into some kind of artistic illustrated book which was not just meant for children. And you will see this is a very important part that we need to pay some kind of an attention to, that the book Bhimayana, as it is a graphic novel and it's illustrated, it's not for only children. Unlike these rest of the other graphic modes, graphic narratives like Amar Chitrakatha, Tintin or Asterix, which are predominantly for a young adult audience, this book is not only for children. There is obviously an attempt at pedagogy, that we need to teach people about Ambedkar. There should be more awareness about Ambedkar, the kind of discrimination he faced as a child as well as an adult, as well as in different parts of the country itself, from different people, from different communities. All of this to underline a kind of a awareness that should be there. There is a certain kind of a pedagogic impulse, we can call it. So that's what was behind it. But if we look at it, so therefore Bhimayana is at the intersection then of two traditions. One is the graphic narrative tradition, and the other being the children's literature, young adult fiction, that is part of the narrative itself. It's a popular comic book that that it situates itself, but thanks to the illustrative, the visual parts of it, but also it situates itself alongside another tradition of graphic novel that is very predominant in West, where you have things like Spielman's Mouse or Persepolis and other such works that are there. If you look at it, in India, comics have a history of it, the kind of comics that we are talking about here. In 1964, Indrajal Comics, owned by Times of India, began marketing King Features syndicates comic books featuring Phantom, Mandrake, Flash Gordon and Buzz Sawyer in Indian languages. In 1976, the company introduced the indigenous comic book Bahadur. Raj Comics, perhaps India's largest publisher in the medium, and the owner of the comic book character Nagraj, Super Commando, Dhruv, Bankelal, Parmanu, Doga, among others, publishes around 80,000 copies annually, is what Pramod Nair tells us. Brought up on Amar Chitra Katha, as Anand also draws our attention to, and a large variety of comic books that India now has access to, starting from Vertigo, DC, Marvel, Jonathan Cape, Virgin and Dark Horse. Indian English speaking youth has access to all of this, and the reader can easily recognize the first sections of Bhimayana, that okay, this belongs to that kind of a tradition, but also it is in the tradition, as I said, of graphic novels, which have very importantly Mouse and celebrated work of Art Spiegelman, and Joe Sacco's work or Marjan Satrapi's work like Persepolis, which take the graphic novel genre to a very different height than the comics that we see that is aimed only for the young adult audience. Like Mouse, which tells us of a story of someone who's in the concentration camp, of a Jew who suffers at the hands of Nazi, and it's a biography of that person. This one is also a biography. Bhimayana is also a biography of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So you see that there are when Anand says that he is not familiar with the term graphic novel, that's also because it's predominantly a Western this thing. In 2004, and Penguin and other houses have started publishing works. One of the leading writers being Sarnath Banerjee, who has been publishing works, All Quiet in Bikaspuri and Corridor and other works that you see. So now graphic novel genre has become a prominent genre with writers like Amrita Patil, Sarnath Banerjee and others. So you can see that there is an exposure that is there right now, but the term graphic novel was not familiar at this point of time when Anand is thinking about it in 2003. As I said, in 2004 onwards, you see publishing houses starting to think about it, and with Sarnath Banerjee's works and everything. So he has access to this comic book stories and everything. So you have these two traditions coming together in Bhimayana, but mostly what he's drawing on is the comics that are available for children. But he says that we were very sure that we wanted this illustrated book not to be only for children. And he says, as a child, I was denied the exposure to all this, and there was a lot of adults in India who have no idea about it. The first image that occurred to me here that here we are. We all know about Gandhi going to South Africa, being thrown off at the train at Pietermaritzburg, but we are never made to think about why he was traveling first class in the first place. So we are talking only about 1893, just 2 years after Ambedkar was born. So Gandhi could afford a first class ticket, and he was asked to get off to share the another compartment. But if you read Gandhi there, he talks about being thrown out along with other kafirs, which is equivalent to using the word nigger. Back then, everybody used it. He was revolted by the idea that, and that led to his shaping of Gandhi's political career itself. And he contrasts that with Ambedkar's story, and he says, as I said, there is a pedagogical impulse to the entire venture, and you can see that that's therefore brings Gandhi, and as we'll see also in the graphic novel itself, that you will see Gandhi and Ambedkar being contrasted, and that's why you see that like everybody knew about Gandhi's story and how the entire idea of Gandhi's politics began, how Gandhi the Indian nationalist was born, and all of this, but no one really knows about the kind of discrimination that that Ambedkar faced on a daily basis. And therefore, he says Gandhi had to travel all the way to South Africa to experience discrimination. However, if you are a Dalit, you may face acute discrimination right at your school, in your immediate surroundings. And that's what waiting for a visa also demonstrated, that the discrimination started from school itself, and we'll see that in a bit. Ambedkar says, and that's what that was the primary impulse, that we should do this, that so that more people know about it. And then came the question of which artist should we go to. In 2007, we had done a book with Durgabai Bhyam, Kanchaila's Turning Pot and Tilling the Land. I felt that kind of art, which was not realistic but suggestive, conceptual, could be turned into a graphic novel. So then he tells us also how the entire thing shaped up. He says, he gives us a bit more detail about using this Gond art, and Gond art, as he describes, and we will also see examples of that, it's not realistic, and these are very key words to remember when we are reading Bhimayana, that Gond art, as we see, is not realistic, but it is suggestive. And in this, it is also closer to Spielman's Mouse, because in Mouse, the Jews are treated as mice and the Nazis as cats. So you have a kind of a symbolic representation of the Holocaust itself. It's not a realistic representation, which is what Pardhan Gond art also gives to Bhimayana. So that's why he goes on to detail that we first storyboarded the story in terms of adapting it into a comic narrative. Back then, storyboard was also biased towards Western style of comic art. It was done by Srividya Natarajan, an old friend and novelist who lives in Canada. However, she had no direct interaction with the Gond way of thinking. To be specific, Pardhan way of drawing things. Gond art in its origin is something that they do to decorate their walls and houses. Every year there is a festival, then there is karma dance, or when they have a wedding, they redo their houses. So these are both murals and also abstract geometrical patterns and conceptual images on their walls, and these are ephemeral. They would disappear every year and reappear in different forms the next year. So this is how it began. And then he goes on to tell us that how Gond art came to be known in the mainstream itself, and the primary reason of this is an illustrious artist named Janagar Singh Shyam and whole lot of others who followed him to Bhopal. And then in late 90s, Tara Books in Chennai started using Gond art in children's books. Later, some critics and commentators called it problematic. It infantilizes Gond art and equates it with only children. But he says that he doesn't see a problem with it, because he thinks that Gond art can be used for various purposes. So, and they did not think of Bhimayana as a children's book only. So, there is, he says that that a lot of effort took to thinking about how do we go about it, and so then they started using a device called digna, which kind of solved their problems. Because if you look at a traditional graphic novel, the page itself, it's divided into panels. Like, so you will have let's say these kinds of panels there, and there can be more on the page itself depending on the kind of thing. And then you have bubbles, speech bubbles, that like where through people speak, and you can put in the characters through that. So it's a very sequential reading that happens. And then the kind of world and Pardhan Gond art that Durgabai and Subhash are used to, as we are told, it's done on the wall. So it's much more expansive, and it's not restrictive to only the page itself. It's not done for the page. It's done as a mural on the walls itself. So the problem was to bring it to the page and then provide this sequential nature of graphic novel itself, so that people can read from page to one page to the other page. So how to do that became a concern, and then they discovered something called digna, which is basically a pattern that can break, that was used to break down pages. The free flowing nature of Gond art could be transcribed into a kind of sequential form. So I want you to pay attention that it was a kind of sequential form. It's not exactly sequential form, as we will see once we look at the pages of it. So then and he says that that at the same time they also managed to break some of the norms of Western comics. For instance, if you read someone like Joe Sacco, who is one of the best practitioners of modern graphic novel, you never find a bird or a tree or a dog or any of those objects. Whereas in Bhimayan, when young Bhim is thirsty in a classroom, Durga drew an image of a fish struggling to get out of him. So if you have read the book, you will in many layers and levels, simply because you have read not just the page, word on the page, but also the visuals work on many levels. So one has to, and one is forced to read both of those things together, both the word on the page as well as the visuals on the page, because sometimes the what will happen is that the visuals will cross the page also, as is the nature of Gond art. So therefore the sequentiality is broken, the sequentiality is subverted, and those will create a kind of landscape like space within the page itself. So what will happen as a result of this is that they will produce, and they will produce very unique pages, unique art forms, and thereby challenge the reader's orthodoxy. So if you are so in a traditional novel, let's say, you will be reading just the words on the page, and the pages will move in a sequence itself. Here, on the other hand, you will constantly have to keep going back and forth, and that will create its own dynamics itself. If I can, let me just show you what I mean by it. If we look at, let's say, this is the page itself, the title page itself, you can see this is what I mean by the representation of Gond art itself. So you have a lot of blues, and the pictures are not representative in that sense, they are symbolic. So you don't, the pictures are not realistic, and then you just see a kind of a symbolic representation. So so therefore they in the first place break many conventions. And if you, like, for example, if you just look at the first page itself, of the book. If you look at it, these are what we call, these are what are the dignas. So without them, the page is entirely filled, as you can see. With the dignas being there, at least you can now portion out the parts of the page itself, so that then this one becomes a panel, and this is how they created panels itself. And these panels are not like, the rectangularity is not there. And as you can see, a lot of things are there. The trees have eyes and arms, and then the eyes are almost like fish eyes, and the speech bubbles are made in this way. You have birds, you have scorpions, all of these kinds of very interesting nuances and cultural specificities and the histories of the art that comes through. So the Gond art, as you see, draws a lot on nature itself. So you will have birds, you will have fishes, you will have elephants, you will have scorpions, all of these part of the narrative itself here. And that brings in a very interesting dynamic, as Anand was mentioning, that if you look at traditional Western graphic narratives, like for example Joe Sacco's, you don't have any of this. So this is, in that sense, a very Indian intervention, a very Indian way of telling a tale. Remember A.K. Ramanujan's question, is there an Indian way of thinking? This is an Indian way of telling, and this is an Indian way of thinking also, that they have tried to adapt a format or genre from the West into this. So if we have adapted the novel through Bankim, and as you will see later in Anuja Chauhan, you will see that the graphic novel is also adapted here to talk about a Dalit story. Histories of oppression comes here interwoven with the story of Bhim Rao Ji Ambedkar. The frame tale begins with in an Indian metropolis with two people talking and discussing the reservation system itself. One of them defends it, the other one is against it. This discussion frames the entire narrative itself, and what happens as a result of that is that we get on to the story of Ambedkar itself, that how Ambedkar is not only a historical figure, but his words, ideas and his politics influences today's India also, the contemporary India itself. So we then are one of the characters who obviously is influenced by Ambedkar's life and world, goes on to describe and recount Ambedkar itself, and through that Ambedkar's story unfolds. And so we have book 1, which is Water, describes his childhood experience. If you remember 3 experiences that he outlined in Waiting for a Visa, one was his childhood experience when he was denied water at school, was insulted as a untouchable. That is part of book 1, which is Water. And then the innovative part of the book is that each of these stories are juxtaposed with contemporary news reports about violence against untouchables. So similarly, where the in book 2, Shelter, describes Ambedkar's Baroda days, when he is back from Colombia and he struggles to find a house. People throw him out of their houses, and once again he faces those similar ostracizing experiences that he had experienced in his childhood. And the third book, Travel, depicts a few of Ambedkar's later experiences as a leader of untouchables within quotes. It also details Ambedkar-Gandhi differences over equal rights and separate electorate. So that's how these three books go, and then at the end we have a kind a short account by Durgabhai and Subhash, how they came to identify themselves with Ambedkar's story and how that unfolded in their experience of doing the art for this book itself.